Over to you.
Invite Eric Huyton up to the stage, and we'll go talk a little bit around that. So, once upon a time, it used to be pretty simple just to pack up your van, put your car on a trailer. Yeah, come and sit here. Put your car on a trailer, jump on a ferry or through the tunnel, and et voila, we're in France and we're able to compete and have fun. But it's a little bit different now post Brexit. There's a fair bit of paperwork to do, and I think COVID aside, lots of new challenges for us all to learn. And I think Eric here from Boomerang Carnets is going to talk a little bit about what it is we need to do and help guide us through what's necessary and what's not necessary. So, I mean, maybe we can start with the basics, Eric. So, what is a carnet and why do I need one?
Well, Henry, first thing to say is I'm a bit overwhelmed by the fantastic stories I've heard so far, and what I'm going to talk about is not really battling through the two terrain in France. However, you're right. Post-Brexit, we do need now to have these customs documents to get us into the country in the first place. So in many ways, actually, obstacles, yeah, the carnet is the first thing you've got to have, because if you don't get into the country in the first place, it's actually going to be pretty impossible to get to the event. And that's the reality of the situation, is that you can actually turn up at customs now at the border and they can actually say, no, you're not coming in, or they can charge you lots of money or impound your vehicle. So they're the horror stories that we are desperately trying to avoid. And we can do that with this document called the ATA carnet, which is actually quite easy to get if you know where to go and how to get it.
So, and is that the only way you can do it? I mean, if you're not doing it for hire or reward, or if you're not part of a company, could you just rock up at the border and say, look, I'm just going on holiday, and this is my car for having some fun whilst I'm on holiday?
Yes and no. I mean, the thing is, the way customs look at things is they're looking for things of commercial value. So you have to put yourself. What I always do is put myself in the shoes of the customs officer at the border. And he's seeing someone coming in with goods and equipment that are worth money. And, is that right? And he's got to make sure that if you're going to bring it into the country, that you're going to take it away with you. Otherwise, if it stays in their country, they want to charge you VAT. They want to charge you duty. And on cars that are worth sometimes £100,000, that's a considerable sum of money. So what the carnet does is basically, it has a list of all your inventory, which is your equipment, your vehicle, your spare parts, the spare tyres, the toolkit, the fan belts, everything you've got as a backup. And all of those things have got what they call commercial value. But because customs officers can see that on a list, it's got an official stamp on it from HMRC, they're happy that they can basically track what's coming into the country and they can track it going out again. So they have an input document, an output document, one cancels out the other, and then they're happy they're not going to charge you any duty and tax.
So I'm sure that will strike fear into some people's minds, because I know what it's like when we pack the van to go to France, is we start out very organised, and I've got a reasonable list of the things that I wanted to take, and we're reasonably organised about what we take. By the time you get to the day before, you think, oh, I better just take this. I better just throw that in. I could do with one of those. Oh, we hadn't thought about this. So even if you had and it's packed somewhere in the depths of the van, you kind of throw another one in and you think, how detailed does that manifest need to be? What sort of level of detail do you need to go to in order to make it work and to smooth that passage through customs and save you the hassle of getting unpacked or kicked out or whatever?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, because people look at their contents of their vans, their trucks, they, like you say, built up probably over tens of years. Bits and bobs being put in places that they even forgot about. Now, the frightening prospect is that if you had to actually list all of that, that would be a very daunting task, down to every last nut and bolt, pair of pliers, spare, whatever. But you have to list the big headline items, so certainly the vehicle, and you can describe that. If it's a production car, based on a Land Rover Discovery, that's quite simple. It's a Land Rover Discovery T5, it's modified, it's got maybe a registration plate, it's got a VIN number. So again, customs officers can see that, they can look at the physical vehicle, they can check it on their list and they say, well, the two things match up, we're happy. When it gets further down the tree into all the spare parts, like I say, fan belts, brake pads, maybe spare tyres, big stuff you can list easily that's got value, but smaller things you don't have to. You can kind of lump it together. So, for example, item 34 might be a toolkit containing hand tools. So that covers all those things, as long as that toolkit isn't worth like £5,000. So you've got to be quite reasonable about these things. But certainly the smaller items you group together, and on the day before, as you say, if you want to put extra things on, that's actually quite difficult to do if they're significant items. If they're small things like an extra rucksack full of spare bits, I wouldn't worry about it. But the whole point about this is give yourself time before you go to the event. Talk to us a couple of weeks beforehand. We can coach you in what to put in your list and what not to put out, and what you can leave out of the list. So it's best to just give yourself a few weeks before that. We'll talk to you, we'll discuss your list, we'll get it in place, we'll knock it back and forth a few times and make sure it's going to be right for the customs officers. And also give yourself more time when you're traveling. So when you get to the border, don't expect to just rock up and within 20 minutes go through customs and get on the boat. It's not going to happen. It can take an hour, it can take 2 hours. So
I understand that the whole point of the carnet is that it's effectively detailing stuff that you're temporarily bringing into the country and then you're bringing back out again. I kind of get that. It can make some sense. What about consumables? So what about stuff that we know we're going to use out there? You know, we've got rolls of tape, we've got oil, we've got, you might even take fuel, whatever, you know. There's going to be a number of things that we use whilst we're there. So clearly we can't bring all of those back. Or I've rolled the car on a ball and, you know, it's not worth bringing back. So, you know, what can I just leave that there? Or blown tires, or, you know, all of those kind of things that you kind of think, well, actually, let's just wait. It's stuff I don't need to bring back. I can tip this out whilst I'm here.
So basically, consumables don't go on the carnet at all. So spare engine oil, things like that, you would not list. Grease you wouldn't list. Oils you wouldn't list. Like you say, gaffer tape, PVC tape, things like that. But again, they are low value. So the customs people aren't particularly interested in the low value items. But you mentioned tires. So you go on your race, you go through the 2 terrain, you've blown 2 tires. They probably are worth £150 each. So it's really good if you can, bring them back. Even though they're shot to bits, bring them back, because if the customs officers see on your export document or your import to them that you've got 6 spare tires valued at a total of £1,000, and when you come out you've only got 4, and you can say, well, actually 2 got shredded. From their point of view, they're still seeing 4 tires, i.e. 2 have been left in country. They're not likely to, but they could say, well, those 2 tires that you've left, they're worth £400. We're going to charge you duty on those tires because they come into our country. So if you can bring things back, like even spare shock absorbers that might have been smashed to bits, just pick them up, put them back in the car, bring them home with you, and that will help.
So what's the process, and how can you help make it simpler for us?
Make it simpler. That's the plan. That's what we're here to do, because you guys want to get racing and you don't have to get turned back and go through all those problems. So it is here to make your life simpler. Like I said, the very first thing to bear in mind is give yourself time. I've got a stand over there. You can come and see me. I can give you a business card, brochures, and let you know where we are. But Boomerang Carnets UK is here to help do that process, and we will talk to you on the phone, email you, and we'll get you through the process. Basically, it's an online platform. You go there, you register for your account, and then you can fill in an online application for a new carnet. There's also a security bond that backs it up, and that's something else to mention, is that the cost of the carnet is variable. The basic document, which is this, is a fixed cost. This is, about £400, including VAT, so it's not insignificant money. But the other part of it is what's called a security bond, which is a monetary instrument, if you like, that guarantees that if you do leave everything or part of your equipment in country for whatever reason, that foreign customs are going to get their money. And that's based on the value of what you're taking, where you're going, and how long for. So those things add up. But we, again, will coach you on that. And it's not madly expensive either. So you have to bear that in mind. And so we need to have that equipment list from you quite early on, have a talk with you about what it's going to be, and then we can give you a quote. And for people in the 4x4 world and the off-road racing world, we're offering discounts on those as well. So we give, a significant discount on those costs.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for explaining a little bit about this world that we're having to find ourselves in if we're wanting to go and compete abroad. We'll talk a little bit more later in relation to some of the other international events that people are taking part in. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Brian. Great to see you as ever, and hopefully we'll catch up in France, if not in the UK, Brilliant. Between now and then.
Thanks, Henry.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Henry.
So, Eric, you've been listening to the conversation that's been going on here, as well as everyone else, and how hard it is to get onto the start line for these events for the very first time. one thing that we could all do without is some of the paperwork and some of the customs grief that we have to go through. How do we make it easier? What's the way through that?
Well, yeah, I mean, customs documents, carnets, not the most interesting aspect of 4x4 racing, I'm sure, for us anyway. But the truth is that once you get to that border point and you're trying to get into a foreign country, you will be standing in front of a customs officer, and literally that is what they're interested in. They're not really concerned about what you're doing, they want to know what you've got. So from their point of view, it's their point of interest. It's a very important thing that we get right. And you guys spend months, if not years, preparing to get to these places. And the last thing we want is for you to get stopped at the border, literally fall at the first hurdle and get turned back, or have to spend a day clearing documents. So what the carnet does is it gets all that squared away for you so that you can have the right paperwork in place and make sure you get through customs on time and easily.
So we talked earlier about France and that being fairly straightforward. Trip used to be very easy. You used to just get on a ferry and pop straight across. Didn't need to worry about any documentation at all. Now that's a bit more complicated. Do the ATA carnets work as well in other parts of the world? I mean, if you're going to Morocco or if you're going to Saudi Arabia, or what's the situation elsewhere in the world?
So around the world, there's 87 countries that are part of this convention. Morocco is one for sure, Saudi is not. So all the countries that are part of the convention, you can use a carnet in. And just to briefly describe what it is, from the customs officer's point of view, they're seeing you come into their country with valuable equipment. It's a 4x4 racing vehicle, there's spare parts, there's lots of good stuff that could be sold in country, and they're concerned that you're not going to pay import duty and tax. And what the carnet does is it has an inventory of everything you've got, lists it all on a document officially, it's all stamped by HMRC, and customs can see what you're bringing in. And then when you've finished the race and you come back out, you can show them that you're taking everything out again with you, and then they're happy that you're not going to pay any tax and duty. So it saves you that money, which is a massive thing, because you can be looking at 40% of the value of your car and accessories and equipment as import duty. And the carnet basically makes that go away. But it also, importantly, means you get through customs quickly and easily because they recognise what you're doing and they've got the document to prove it.
So what is it that we need to include in a carnet when we're considering going abroad and we're taking all of our equipment with us? I mean, do we have to go down to the nth degree in terms of making sure that all of the biros that we've taken with us to make sure that we can write up our notes at the end of the day? I mean, what needs to be included?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, the big headline items are very obvious, so the vehicle itself, and it's easy if you've got something like a Land Rover. It could be a Land Rover Discovery TD5, it's got a registration plate, it's got a VIN number. That's pretty easy to describe. And again, that is the main headline item, so that's what the big value is involved in. And then you go down the tree and you've got spare parts like tyres. You certainly list your tyres. You might have 6 spare trail blade tyres, for instance, and you put those on the carnet. Anything with a serial number, anything with a value, I would say more than 100, 150 pounds, you could list as a separate item. But when it gets down to the small nitty-gritty parts like just the spares, the nuts and bolts, the toolkits, you can block all those things together. So you'd have a line item saying one toolkit containing hand tools, value £100. So it's not like you've got to do everything, because after all, these support vehicles and all the contents in them, they've probably taken years to get together. And even the drivers probably don't know exactly what's there, down to the nth degree.
And I guess the other thing is that, I mean, I know from my own experience, but when you're trying to do this, you try and be as organised as you possibly can be, but inevitably there are things you've forgotten about when it comes to actually loading the van up, or when it comes to arriving at customs and you've forgotten you've done something. What can we do to help that? I mean, is there anything? Do we just all have to be much more organised than we're used to, or?
Short answer is yes, you do have to be more organised, and I always say to people, give yourself plenty of time. Don't do it the day before. Give yourself a couple of weeks to talk to us first. Give me a phone call, tell us where you're going, what sort of things you're going to take. And you'll have to get things together on an Excel spreadsheet. And that's the most difficult, the most onerous part of the task really, is doing that. But you have to go through that process. You're only going to do it once. And you can send me that Excel and I'll look at it and I'll advise you on what you need to get better, more description, or what you don't need to worry about. So we'll have that sort of to and fro between us a few times, and then when we finally do the online application for the documents, it should all go fairly smoothly. But yeah, always talk to us and we'll give you the advice in advance. But in terms of what you can add after the carnet's been produced, you have got to be careful there. You could add a few small things that aren't very valuable and just not mention them, but you couldn't, for instance, take a different vehicle. You couldn't say, I'm not taking the Discovery, I'm going to take something else. That would not work because that's not on the carnet. So big value items have got to be listed and they've got to stay on the carnet.
And do we have to go through this process every time we go abroad? I mean, so if we're trying to do a series, if we were doing the International Cross Country Cup for Bajas, or if we were doing a number of the Dakar series, or is this something you've got to do absolutely every time we go, or are there some shortcuts that we can take there?
Well, yes, a very good point. Again, what we will help you do is get the most value out of your carnet, because the carnet itself is valid for 12 months anyway. And if you talk to us ahead of time and do a bit of prep, we can make sure that your equipment list, which is called the general list on the carnet, covers all the items you're going to take for all the races. And what that means is that if, very simply, you have 100 items, but for one race you only want to take 70 of them, that's fine. Or you could take all 100, or you could take a different 50 of them, or a different 50 to the next race. So it's quite flexible in that sense. But what you could never do is take 110 items. So you can't add things to that carnet list, but you can take fewer items that are on there. So with a bit of planning and pre-thought, you can make that work for the whole year. And that means that the per trip cost of the carnet just massively goes down, so it becomes more cost effective.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. Yeah, I know you're in the corner. Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah, please.
Hello. So a few questions on this. Interesting enough, I'm just doing a little bit of a trip down to Kenya and around there and everything, so I'm just dealing with carnets. So at the moment, to just clear up for everybody, normally you just drove into France, but now if you take your motorsport vehicle, they're saying you need carnets to go into certain ones. So like say Morocco. So do you have to have a carnet, or if the vehicle, so she drives one of our cars, my race car is in my name, can you not just do it at the moment as it is, like a temporary import where you drive in? Or does it have to be a carnet if it's motorsport?
If you're driving your vehicle on the road and it's not on a trailer, the chances are very good that you cannot need a carnet, that's for sure. But again, it becomes a question of describing what you're doing. So always you're going to get to customs, and customs officers are going to stop you and ask you, well, they might not, but you take a bit of a gamble. If you've got all the accessories and the bits that go with that vehicle that have got commercial value, i.e. they could reasonably be sold in that country, then you might want to think about using a carnet, just because it's going to be safer.
So what's your experience at the moment of going into France or like Spain at the moment? Are people still trying to do it without carnets and struggling, or are they just getting carnets?
I don't hear many stories from people who've not got carnets, but so I don't know, obviously. But yes, it's a gamble. You're not legally required to have one. You don't need one at all. You can just drive in and you can try your best to talk your way through, and you might be okay. But if you've invested all this time and money getting ready for a big race like the Dakar, the last thing you want is to have hassle at the customs point going in.
I mean, for anyone a lot of the really big races, like Dakar especially, Dakar exists in a weird bubble because it's so high up in the government. They tend to fix all of this for you. You deliver the cars down to Marseille and they just magically appear. I mean, our Excel spreadsheets say a box of thingies, a bag of widgets and stuff like this. We never list everything. People think you have to list every note, and you don't. But it's interesting, like Morocco. Like we've tried carnets into Morocco, and they've been troublesome. And then, as long as there's enough people with registration certificates, you can tend to get in. But you're right; it depends how risky you want to take it.
Exactly, yeah. And it always comes down at the end of the day to the person you're talking to. Some customs officers will just wave you straight through. Others are going to go right through everything. And it's luck of the draw. But if you've got your documentation correct, at least you've got a good starting point.
And the carnet, for people there, the carnet is based on a fixed fee and then a percentage of the value of the vehicle.
Correct, yeah. So it comes in two parts. So the carnet document itself is one of these, and that basically is a fixed fee just to produce the paperwork. And then the other part of that is what's called a security bond, which is based on the value of what you've got, where you're going to, and how long you're going for. And that varies depending on those factors, yeah.
So this document, when you get to the port, they stamp it into the country, and when you leave and you haven't illegally sold everything, they stamp it out. And when you return, I return this to you, you refund some of the money.
No, that's not how it works. No,
it's just a flat fee.
It's a flat fee, yeah. Right. So the security bond is put up as a monetary unit that guarantees the payment. If we didn't have that, you would have to put in a bank account somewhere 40% of the value of your goods. So if you've got 100 grand's worth of vehicle and spares, you would have to put up a £40,000 money bond, which would be money from your bank account. And if you bring everything else okay, you can get it back. But with the security bond, you pay a small premium on that instead, which is just a few £100s.
So then, to make it clear for people, if you didn't come back with a vehicle because you'd taken it to Morocco and sold it and done hooky, and you didn't get the stamp out, then you don't pay it, you then chase the people for the money. It's your risk, but you will come for the money, basically.
Actually, that's quite a misunderstanding. So the security bond is based on an insurance product, but it doesn't cover you for that. So the reality is that if you do leave things in country, and say France, EU or Morocco haven't got a corresponding export voucher, then they know you've left that in their country, or at least they think you have. And they will come after you for that import duty. And the first port of call is the carnet holder, which will be you or your company, and you have to pay that. Now, in the event that your company isn't trading anymore or you can't pay it for whatever reason, the default is to go to the insurance. So the country's customs know they're going to get their money, but they come to you first.
Okay, one last thing. So you've gone out for your race, you take your nice race car, and then you've had a huge disaster, because these big races are all disasters. The car gets burnt out, and it's a full burnt out scrap, you're just leaving it there. How does that work then?
I would take lots of photographs and I would bring back any bits that you can, child remains, anything. I was saying earlier that say you have 6 spare tyres and you blow 2 of them, bring back those that are blown as well, because then on the carnet you've taken 6 out, they can see 6 coming back, and they're not going to charge you duty on the 2 you've left behind that are scrap.
So don't leave things behind, basically.
Yeah, really, if you can, yeah. I mean, shock absorbers, things sometimes get blown out on the course, you can't get them. You can always explain to customers what happens. I mean, the first thing is they're going to look at things, or they're not going to look at things anyway. They might just stamp your carnet. They'll ask you, this has happened to me loads of times, is it all here? You say, yes, it is. On you go. It's only if they start drilling down and looking for things and say, hang on a minute, you've got 6 tyres going out and I can only see 4, then you have to explain.
Like you say, it's down to the at the port at the time. Most of our experiences are who's on the port at the time, what time it is, whether they had an argument with the wife in the morning and things like that.
Yeah.
But if you're planning to go, the carnet is more a dead cert you're getting through, because you can argue it then.
Absolutely, it's a good thing to have. And the other thing to mention is that, for people in this 4x4 community, we offer a big discount, a significant discount on the insurance bond anyway, so we're going to help out with that, and we just want to help you get there generally and make sure you get to the race and get on with what you do best.
Wrap there. Really good discussion, very helpful. Thank you very much to this fantastic panel for their insight, and it would be wonderful to chat all afternoon. Hopefully another time we can. Thank you very much. Round of applause, please.